We've talked about this before, about post-traumatic slave syndrome and those types of things.
Post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yeah.
I don't think I've
you never heard of that concept? Yeah, just like post-traumatic stress. You know, you have somebody that goes away. They just stay over. They gotta do 1 or 2 tours, right? So you're talking about somebody been in hundreds of years of slavery. So why can't that type of stress be passed down? You say, just go there for 6 weeks and come back, they all messed up.
That's right, and we've been through it for life.
That's right. They take an elephant, they take them out the jungle, put them in a circus and keep them there. They wonder why they go crazy every once in a while, running on, and they think that we shouldn't have that.
Okay, well, that's good.
I'm gonna throw a little bit of that in there.
That's excellent. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's excellent. Sociology of race. That's excellent. I'm glad we did this. It makes sense. You've got so much information. Just all that information.
How do you coin it down to like segments? You need to go on and on about it. You know how we go. We go for 2 or 3 hours.
Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. EKSanford from Tennessee State University, and he's given us a sociological understanding of race in the United States of America. Doctor, during this last segment, let's see if we can further elaborate upon some of the things that you've already given us dealing with race in America, and give us any kind of example that you think might further sort of enhance our knowledge in reference to what we're doing here today.
Okay, and as we said, race is a complex issue, so much so that sociologists look at overt and covert type of racism that exists within the society. Overt is the traditional one that people might say, yeah, it's so obvious that you've lent someone or you've done some other items out there that's just so glaring. During the civil rights movement, when dogs and water holes, it's just glaringly. Covert is that type of a racism that when you go in and want to make a purchase, and the interest rates happens to be a lot more higher for one group of people than another group. That brings us into the conversation that when we really want to make an intervening inroads to racism in America, that we have to understand some of the basic key terms, and everyone has to understand them. For one, we have to understand dominant group and subordinate group. That given our country and its unfolding from 1619 to 2016, that there is a dominant culture within the social structure, within family, within economics, within medicine, within law, within the government, within mass media, communication, entertainment. All of those institutions that are here in America were defined by the dominant group. Now, I know we've been talking about African Americans, but it's assumed that all other ethnic groups that come in with different cultures and languages and backgrounds have to assimilate, which is a process of understanding your own culture, but then learning all of the dominant culture's values and norms. And that's what happens within American society, and we've all done that. One of the major institutions, such as education, from first grade through high school, and then from there through higher education, has a tendency to do that. We're supposed to assimilate, which people have done. But what happens in many instances that people do not understand racism part and discrimination part, which is looking at another person based on those alleged or real physical characteristics and then acting toward that person in a certain way. And when they do that consciously or unconsciously, it happens to be racism. Yes. Now, another term that we have to understand, in addition to dominant group, subordinate group, is that of prejudice. Prejudice is a negative attitude or belief that one has a tendency to generalize about that other group. And they do that because of the type of culture and society that we've grown up in. And sometimes it's very unconscious. For instance, we all know about the disparities that have happened with police officers killing African Americans. I bet if we had a conversation with that police officer, he would say, some of my best friends are African American, we play basketball together, we have cookouts together.
And mean it too.
Yeah, and mean it too. But they do not understand that this thing that we are talking about today is in the subconscious. So when they get there and feel empowered and see this other person, something that's been so ingrained has a tendency to come out at that particular point in time. That's why it's very important to understand how this is so ingrained in the American ethos, in the American culture, to the point that if we don't understand the terms, then we will not understand how it's so overgeneralized. And another one, I must say very quickly, is that of stereotypes. Yes. So since prejudice is a negative attitude or belief that's generalized about a particular group, a stereotype is the overgeneralization toward another group. So you can have a group of people that are in a homogeneous area, meaning all by themselves, as all one group, one ethnic group, say European Americans that live in a certain rich area or live in a place like Montana or North Dakota, South Dakota, as we're seeing today in our presidential debate that's going on. And they might have this overgeneralization about, say, having an African American president that in their subconscious make them feel, well, hey, that's enough, and that we're going to not vote and help or be an assistance way to something that's supposed to be better for everyone else in America. So that's an overgeneralization, a stereotype that you have about a person before they even show up. And so these terms are very important. Now, Dr. Leary would ask a group of people, this is to try to share, if you had a group of African Americans in the audience, let's say 400 or 500, and if you would ask the question, can African Americans or other ethnic groups be racist toward other African Americans? Social scientifically, we would say no. Why? Because race and racism is empowerment, is power. Do you own the very economics that you can then make a negative prejudice attitude towards someone or overgeneralize about them and give them mistreatment or be discriminatory? In many instances, we must make a distinction between that African Americans can be prejudiced toward each other, or another ethnic group might be prejudiced, but they cannot be racist toward another group. So that's why I'm trying to indicate today in our discussion that it's very important to understand the definition and difference between racism and prejudice. Racism is that negative attitude and belief that one is superior or inferior based on those physical characteristics, and as a result of that, you would have a stereotype or overgeneralization toward that person before you even get to know them. Prejudice
Racism sees only the outside.
Yes.
And prejudice looks deeper on the inside. Would that be a fair characterization?
Yeah, that would be. So everyone can be that way, but then one is when you act upon the other. Now, what's the sociological point? By us understanding that, you might say that I have never been around, and Dr. Gordon Allport would suggest, as you have just said, if you get to know the other group, then your prejudice starts to reduce because you start having a better insight about the other group if you've experienced what they have experienced, either educationally, that's why we fight for diversity in higher education, or going into that particular area. For instance, I was oblivious to homelessness, so I had to live among the homeless and do my dissertation to know more about them. So if you are a part of that dominant group, you must get to know those that are in the subordinate group and understand their culture. And by understanding it, then you can at least make a very good and objective decision about what you are doing. And I think that helps us have a brighter tomorrow here in American society. But our flaw is this. From 244 years of enslavement, 81 years of Jim Crow laws, America has been in denial about that. If you look at the comparison with South Africa, they will say very clearly, we did the same thing, but we were wrong. We did wrong. We were racist toward people. We discriminated against them. We want to apologize. We want to go out now and try to have a better democracy for everyone. And so you can see that they are much more advanced. Now, President William Clinton made an effort to have a national debate on race and racism, had excellent scholars, Dr. James Jones, Dr. Jack DeBidio, and many others who headed that up. And they tried to have this national conversation, and it kind of died down. But that's one of our flaws here in America. But we have to be able to understand the terms in a correct way. We can't have misunderstanding about the terms in race because it is so complex, it is so embedded. Now, when you move into the Generation X and the millennials, this is what we were talking about when we say about race, how it's socially constructed. And with so many changes that are positive, people have a false sense of reality that is not present.